Hi, I have good news and bad news. The bad news is we're facing a climate catastrophe. The good news is that we can actually reverse it and potentially solve it. Our climate crisis is a very inconvenient truth. We're overheating our planet to alarming levels with catastrophic consequences. According to NASA, 19 of the 20 warmest years have all occurred since 2001, with the exception of 1998. And 2020 is on a sizzling pace to be one of the hottest years on record. Every decade since the 1970s has been hotter than the previous decade. So picture an overheated car and what we drive, an overcooked dinner and what we eat, and someone sick with a fever and how we act. Now imagine that on a planetary scale. Our climate crisis is the biggest social, political, economic, and environmental threat facing our planet and its inhabitants, we Earthlings together, affecting every country and every species, mostly in negative ways. Climate change refers to the increasing average surface temperature of the Earth's air and water and its various environmental effects. People are becoming increasingly aware of and concerned about the climate crisis and its consequences, despite corporate misinformation and right-wing media obfuscation, due to frequent reports regarding record heat, droughts, wildfires, an increase in the number and severity of storms and other extreme weather events. The melting of glaciers. About 80% of the world's glaciers are shrinking. Permafrost, polar ice caps, decreasing snow on Mount Kilimanjaro and other mountains, shrinking lakes, rising sea levels, flooding, submerged islands, changes in wind directions, acidification of the oceans, endangered species, even extinctions, spreading diseases, environmental refugees, even more earthquakes and the possibility of tsunamis, and other ominous signs of disaster. Greenhouse gas levels in the atmosphere continue to rise, and there are fears of tipping points from which we could not come back. Climatologists have asserted that concentrations of 350 parts per million of atmospheric carbon dioxide, CO2, is a threshold level of atmospheric carbon dioxide, which had hovered below 285 parts per million for thousands of years prior to the Industrial Revolution, yet surpassed 418 recently on June 1st, 2020, the highest value in human history, indeed the highest value in almost 3 million years. Jerry Brown was the former governor of California. He says, humanity is on a collision course with nature, calling this Anthropocene era the new abnormal, and warning that various environmental disasters will only intensify over the coming years. Right now, we are facing a man-made disaster of global scale, says David Attenborough. Our greatest threat in thousands of years, climate change, if we don't take action. The collapse of our civilizations and the extinction of much of the natural world is on the horizon. Global climate change is also endangering polar bears, penguins, seals, walruses, salmon, elephants, giraffes, frogs, butterflies, bees, birds, and many other animals, threatening up to 1/3 of fauna species, animals. In contrast, increases in carbon dioxide and heat levels will lead to an increase in the number and range of mosquitoes, further spreading discomfort and disease. Additionally, there is an increase in food insecurity, terrorism, ethnic violence, and war. According to various militaries and intelligence agencies, especially in Central America, South Asia, Africa, and the Middle East. In December, 2019, the World Meteorological Organization, Secretary General Petteri Talas lamented that we will witness ever more harmful impacts on human well-being if we do not substantially reverse course. And we can. We know what to do. It is noteworthy that both teenage Greta Thunberg and nonagenarian David Attenborough both went vegan for the climate, as have many others. We welcome you to consider that. Following years of unprecedented and record-breaking events, on June 20th, 2020, the temperature in the Arctic Circle soared to 38 degrees Celsius for the first time in recorded history, while it was snowing in other parts of Siberia. Houston, Texas has been ravaged by 5 500-year storms in the last 5 years. Something projected to happen only once in half a millennium happened 5 times in a row. None of this is normal. None of it. These and various other extreme weather events and ecospasms have become more frequent, more intense, and are projected to multiply with dire consequences for the world. Tragically, new records are being set each year, most of them disastrous. Yet, we've also seen a record number of people interested and concerned about climate change, about our environment, about sustainability, about animals, livestock, diet, health, well-being, social change, what we can do. The world affects us, and we know that we, in turn, can affect the world. Humanity is threatened as never before, and major changes need to occur to put our imperiled planet on a sustainable path, and as soon as possible. Even though a small number of individuals still deny the reality of climate change, there is strong scientific and environmental consensus across a wide range of disciplines that climate change is real, serious, worsening, and caused by human activity, anthropogenic. Among all major scientific and environmental organizations, journals, magazines, and museums, and nearly all peer-reviewed scholarly articles, in addition to all reputable colleges and universities, and most governments and large corporations, the evidence is overwhelming and continuing to pile up about the problems of climate change and the solutions of veganism. In 2020, California and several other Western states experienced massive wildfires, along with some record temperatures. The Korean Peninsula was struck by 2 severe typhoons, and the Philippines was also struck again. The U.S. Gulf Coast was hit by multiple hurricanes. There were reports that melting of ice in Greenland had passed a point of no return, and that rapid melting of Arctic permafrost is releasing shocking amounts of dangerous gases. Many cities and countries face flooding, including Singapore and many other places. This is truly an Earth emergency, and we Earthlings are standing at a global precipice. The choice is in our hands and in our mouths. The 2019 Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, 6th assessment report on global warming was written by about 100 climate scientists from about 40 countries, based on nearly 7,000 scientific studies and over 42,000 expert and governmental comments. The IPCC has 195 member states. The report carefully delineates clear trends and potentially catastrophic consequences associated with climate change, warning of irreversible change unless we make radical and unprecedented efforts to counter global warming. According to the United Nations Foundation, overall it is expected that every degree of warming will likely reduce crop yields, productivity, and livestock production globally, while food demand continues to rise. And even worse, hunger and water crises, either caused or exacerbated by climate change, may generate ripple effects across society, leading to poverty, conflict, and mass migration. One action that the IPCC recommends is to change what's on our plates. Swap out meat for more plant-based foods. Think beans instead of beef. While we need collective policy changes, individual actions do add up and send an important message to leaders and others. Acting conservatively, the IPCC makes it plain that the current and projected climate change is not simply natural variation or solar activity, and certainly not a Chinese hoax, it should be needless to say, but extremely likely, meaning 95% to 100% confidence, the result of human activity. The case is closed on the problem of anthropogenic climate change, with only the extent, mitigations, and solutions still to debate. Picture Japan suffering from flooding along its coastal cities and contamination of its fresh water supply. Eyeing Russia's Sakhalin Island oil and gas reserves as an energy source, suggests a US Pentagon memo on global warming. Envision Pakistan, India, and China all armed with nuclear weapons, skirmishing at their borders over refugees, access to shared rivers, and arable land. The former Secretary General of the United Nations, Ban Ki-moon, has said that climate change needs to be taken as seriously as war, and further, that changes in our environment and the resulting upheavals from droughts to inundated coastal areas to loss of arable land are likely to become a major driver of war and conflict. Fighting global climate change may be one way to prevent future wars and genocides, simultaneously increasing energy security and physical security. There are additional causes for concern. The people disproportionately affected by climate chaos are the poor and socially disadvantaged, since they are in the weakest position to guard against environmental damages, and will likely suffer the most harm. In the underdeveloped world, and perhaps especially in China, India, and Southeast Asia, as well as much of Africa, the Middle East, and Latin America, climate change is negatively affecting urban drinking water systems, agricultural output in rural areas, and commercial and other transport on rivers. Further, increased suffering and increased numbers of environmental refugees, along with greater anxiety over access to food, water, land, and housing, the material essentials of life, often lead to unstable conditions that give rise to anger, ethnic violence, gangs, terrorism, fascism, and war. It is the poorest of the poor in the world, and this includes poor people even in prosperous societies who are going to be hit worst. States IPCC Chair, the former Rajendra Pachauri, those who needlessly degrade and destroy the environment to satisfy their own selfish pleasures are like the pre-revolutionary Queen Marie Antoinette declaring, "Let them eat carbon dioxide." How callous some of us could be, how disconnected some of us could be, and we know the consequences. Yes, we need our governments, corporations, schools, religious institutions, and other organizations to get actively involved in fighting climate change. Yes, we need to stop deforestation and increase reforestation. Yes, we need more resource conservation and more energy efficient vehicles, appliances, electronics, batteries, and light bulbs. Yes, we need more conservation, recycling, and composting. And yes, our society needs to switch away from dirty and dangerous fossil fuels towards renewable energy, such as solar, wind, tidal, wave, biomass, hydrogen, geothermal, algae, and others. But while we're struggling for these important and positive large-scale social changes, we also need to say yes to personal changes. In fact, the fourth IPCC report states that changes in lifestyle and consumption patterns that emphasize resource conservation can contribute to developing a low-carbon economy that is both equitable and sustainable. A major study showing how personal changes in lifestyle and consumption can affect global warming is in the 2006 UN Food and Agriculture Organization, the FAO, report titled Livestock's Long Shadow. It states plainly that animal-based agriculture causes approximately 18% of greenhouse gas emissions, which lead to global warming, an amount greater than caused by all forms of transportation on the planet combined, which is about 13.5%. All cars, all trucks, all boats and ships, all planes and helicopters combined. A 2009 report by the respected World Watch Institute titled Livestock and Climate Change determined that the FAO grossly underestimated livestock's contribution by neglecting phenomena inherent to the livestock industry, and puts the total contribution at 51%, an absolute majority of anthropogenic greenhouse gases. When we look at the complete life cycle and death cycle involved in the livestock industry, from the growing of feed to the cleaning, to the slaughtering, to the transporting, the refrigerating, and the distributing and the consuming. The production and consumption of meat and animal products is a majority of the greenhouse gases that lead to global climate change. We know what the problem is. We know what the solution is. The world is feeding approximately 70 billion farmed animals, while millions of people, disproportionately children, starve to death each year. Almost 40% of the grain produced worldwide, and about 70% in my country, the United States, is inefficiently and immorally diverted to feed farmed animals simply to satisfy the lust for money and meat. The FAO study reports that the livestock industry in total uses and abuses roughly 30% of the planet's surface, thereby entering into direct competition with other activities for scarce land, water, and other natural resources. Further, overuse of the land by livestock, leading to overuse of fuel and water, also degrades the land and pollutes the water around it, contributing to additional environmental and health problems. While factory farm may be the worst offenders, similar dynamics occur with free-range livestock as well. In fact, free-range livestock actually occupy and potentially pollute a greater amount of land. An animal-based diet also uses energy very inefficiently. Grains, lentils, and beans require only 2 to 5% as much fossil fuel as beef. Reducing energy consumption is not only a better choice in terms of fighting climate change, it is also a better choice in terms of health and being less dependent on foreign oil and the vagaries of both markets and dictators. When you do something that's better for your health, it's better for the environment. When you improve your diet, you also improve the world around you. As you potentially extend your longevity, you extend the longevity of our planet and our fellow inhabitants. The editors of World Watch in 2004 concluded that the human appetite for animal flesh is a driving force behind virtually every major category of environmental damage now threatening the human future: deforestation, erosion, fresh water scarcity, air and water pollution, climate change, biodiversity loss, social injustice, the destabilization of communities, and the spread of diseases. Environmentalist Lee Hall is more succinct. She says, behind virtually every great environmental complaint, there's milk and meat. It's not complicated. It's complex, but it's not complicated. While growing concern about climate change is welcome, the many connections between the increasingly globalized Western-style diet and climate change have generally been overlooked, marginalized, or outright denied. Despite the clear evidence, it is indeed another inconvenient truth. The production of meat and dairy contributes significantly to the emission of the three major greenhouse gases associated with climate change: carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide, as well as other eco-destructive gases such as ammonia, which contributes to acid rain, and hydrogen sulfide, which has been implicated in mass extinctions. Indeed, according to the UN Environmental Programme, the Unit on Climate Change, there is a strong link between human diet and methane emissions from livestock. The World Watch publication State of the World is more specific regarding the link between animals raised for meat and global warming. Belching, flatulent livestock emit 16% of the world's annual production of methane, a powerful greenhouse gas. Physics World says the animals we eat emit 21% of all the carbon dioxide that can be attributed to human activity. We now know that these are actually underestimates, as I indicated before. They don't include transportation, water use, refrigeration, waste. The livestock industry, when we talk about it, doesn't include dead stock, the animals that are killed or die and can't be rendered for meat, sold commercially for meat. Eating meat and other animal products directly contributes to this environmentally irresponsible industry and its devastating impact on the environment, including the continuing catastrophes of climate change. Although carbon dioxide is the most plentiful greenhouse gas, more than 35% higher than pre-industrial atmospheric levels, methane is 84 times more powerful, over 150% higher than pre-industrial atmospheric levels. And nitric oxide is a whopping 296 times more potent, and at least 20% higher than pre-industrial atmospheric levels than carbon dioxide in terms of its global warming potential. With the livestock industry emitting such a huge amount of methane, and given that methane degrades relatively quickly in the atmosphere, with most dissipated in approximately 12 years for methane as compared to hundreds and sometimes thousands of years for carbon dioxide, a sharp decrease in animal consumption and therefore subsequent livestock reproduction would provide the necessary near-term alleviation from climate change spinning out of control. Indeed, we have baked in a lot of the climate change damage, a lot of the heat potential as the gases trap heat in our atmosphere. We have baked that into our system, especially when it comes to carbon dioxide, and some of that is now tragically unavoidable. But because methane can dissipate within 12 years, it means that a radical change in humanity's diet not only makes each of us healthier, not only makes each of us more compassionate, not only reduces suffering in the world, but would actually start to reduce and reverse the greenhouse gas emissions that are trapped in our atmosphere and would lessen part of what is inevitably going to happen. Changing from the standard American diet, SAD, to a vegetarian, or better yet, vegan diet, according to geophysicist Guyton Eschel and Pamela Martin at the University of Chicago, does more to fight global climate change than switching from a gas-guzzling Hummer to a Camry or from a Camry to a Prius. It has been said that eating meat is like driving a huge SUV, and a vegetarian diet is like driving a hybrid car, while local, organic, vegan eating, love, is like riding a bicycle. Let's bring more love to our lives. Let's reduce our methane mouth prints in addition to our carbon footprints. And let's take the dye out of our diets and live peacefully, happily, healthily. Shifting away from SUVs, SUV lifestyles, and SUV-style diets to energy-efficient, life-affirming, empowering alternatives is essential to fighting our climate crisis. Planet sustainability and the well-being of humanity are greatly dependent on a shift toward plant-based diets. One easy and effective way to fight climate chaos every day, every meal, is with our forks, knives, spoons, and chopsticks. If we don't, the procrastination penalty will be painful. It is increasingly clear that eliminating, or at least sharply reducing, the production and consumption of meat and other animal products is imperative to help fight our collective climate crisis and other grave environmental threats. In addition to greatly benefiting one's physical, mental, and spiritual health, as well as the lives of billions and billions of animals. American writer Mark Twain is reported to have quipped that everybody talks about the weather, but no one ever does anything about it. Now we can. Indeed, we must repair our climate if we want a chance at long-term survival and a decent, livable world for future generations. The answer, my friends, is in your hands, and the answer is in your mouth. Thank you.